That's the wrong button. Here we go.
Yummy like a gummy bear.
Hey.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for May 13th, 2024 for the next hour or so. Let me help you sort your way through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, Final Fantasy publisher Square is making a big change, and what will Switch remasters look like on Switch 2? But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host of Game Mess Mornings. It's Emma Fyffe, everybody. Emma, how are you doing?
I only have one thing to say, and it's death to Kronos.
Yes, kill Kronos. Death to Kronos,
Yes.
indeed. You've played. When did you start it? You started on at the start of the weekend.
I started on Monday.
Okay.
I was basically. So just for everybody's reference here, I have played Hades 2 for 17 hours now, but I will say that was largely broken up because the thing about it is early on in the game, since you're not necessarily getting terribly far, it's very easy to go, okay, well, I'll just do one run. And also at the point that it's like, I haven't run out of story to discover. So every single time I go back to the encampment, there's new dialogue and story developments and blah, blah, blah. I don't appreciate the update where Kronos sneers at me every single time I lose now. Literally every time I fail, Kronos just comes in and is like, I knew you would fail. I'm like, God damn it, Kronos. But yeah, it's been a really great time. Hades for me was a revelation of a game.
Oh, yeah.
I've never necessarily been a roguelike person, but
They figured a lot out with that game.
They figured a lot out with that game. I have probably around 400 hours in OG Hades.
Yeah, that rules.
And also I am lightly into speedrunning. So I have 9 minutes and 30 time, which is nowhere near any of the people who are world record holders, but I have a 9 minutes and 30 with the fists and maybe a 9:56 with the adamant rail. And so what's been interesting about Hades 2 is unlearning the instinct to go fast because I don't know the enemy patterns yet.
Right.
I need to learn the game first before I can attempt to go fast.
And a lot of it's changed.
Yeah, a lot of it has changed. So yeah, it's a lot of fun though. I'm having a really good time.
Yeah, I put down Hades 2 for a bit to get through Animal Well, and I did enjoy that game. I got the credits, which I can very much tell is not really the end of the game, but I'm also not itching to go solve the rest of the puzzles. I thought it was an okay game. I was not blown away by it like some people were. I get it. But it's this is very well done. These puzzles are good. I'm just not feeling that yearning to go through and find the rest of the hidden Easter eggs.
Totally.
And then the there's another layer of puzzle in there where it's okay, I could work together with people, but it's kind of more fun to just let them do that and go have them make a YouTube video about it and tell me about it at a certain point. So I'm glad I played it, and I think that it was really, really well done, but I'm happy to get back to Hades 2 as well. Yep.
I mean, it's great.
Yep. All right, let's explain what we do here. Most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with Square Enix announces plans to bring more of its games to Xbox and PC and revive old franchises. This is from Alexander Cope at Windows Central. On May 13th, 2024, Square Enix released to the public a document containing the company's financial reports for the end of the fiscal year. The report includes an important announcement from Square Enix that it plans to focus on releasing future games on multiple gaming platforms as part of a new business strategy. The full statement can be found as part of the report. It includes references including for HD titles, the group will aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs, especially in regards to major franchises and AAA titles, including catalog titles. It will build an environment where customers can enjoy our titles anywhere. Stop there and we'll kind of discuss that. That's not too surprising at this point, right? It definitely felt like this is the way the wind was blowing for Square Enix, and them fully embracing that and announcing it publicly. It's like, yeah, that sounds about right for this moment in time for Square Enix, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what other choice do they have at this point in some ways? Because, you know, first of all, if you take the example of Sega Atlas and the success that they have had with bringing the Persona titles over to the Xbox, many of them on Game Pass, some of them day one Game Pass releases, like that was such a smart move on their part in terms of like engaging the JRPG community. And obviously that is what Square is super famous for. So, I mean, this is not surprising to me at all, you know, given the fact that a lot of their sales have been lackluster with their big flagship titles, as we've discussed on this show previously. So, I mean, what else can you do at this point? You know, like this seems like this is it.
Yeah, and it's it really, this means, I think, what the big change here would be is timed exclusives on PlayStation probably don't make a lot of sense anymore. I think that getting money up front from Sony definitely made some sense there in a moment. But it feels like the detrimental effect on the ability to sell these games in an ongoing way is maybe bigger than they were anticipating, and now they're like, look around, like, what can we do about this? So maybe that's a strategy we will not duplicate in the future. And they elaborate on that. They say in the HD, which is I guess the high definition subsegment, consolidated net sales for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2024, increased compared with the previous fiscal year due to the release of titles including Final Fantasy XVI, Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered, Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. However, operating losses grew to higher development costs, amortization, and advertising expenses, as well as higher content valuation losses versus the previous fiscal year. And I think what they're getting at is like, yeah, we did release a lot of games, and they performed well enough for us to see increased revenues, but we need more than that because these things are getting more expensive, and so it doesn't make sense. We need to be spreading the love everywhere, and that's the plan. That's not the only thing changing over at Square Enix. They're also mentioning, hey, we want to make fewer games, better games, but also release them more frequently. It's a little bit muddy exactly what they're getting at. I think what they're trying to say is we're doubling down on our core franchises, and we're going to release those more frequently, and then fewer of these dalliances that are from that kind of come out of nowhere.
Sure,
and also makes sense, right?
Well, and what's interesting here is that, you know, when you're dealing with a series like a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Quest, and I mean, you see the same thing I brought up before, the Persona titles, that there are common elements, but they're not a single story thread. So this is a situation wherein I think that franchises are good because you have that recognition of there's a certain level of quality and familiarity that is expected without it being an MCU situation where you are just, there's too much, don't care anymore. But with Final Fantasy, again, you are basically starting from zero every single time effectively. So I think that this makes a lot of sense. That being said, you know, there are some conversations there about bringing in reviving older franchises. And if you can bring back Parasite Eve anytime, Square, anytime. Yeah, anytime I'm ready, please.
I wonder what the chances are for something like that. So like, they definitely say that let's see here, on top of committing to more multi-platform releases, Square Enix plans to revive some of its older IP with new games, as noted on this quote from page 8 of the report. In addition, the group will strive to increase its success rate in games by launching a carefully curated selection of titles. It will additionally explore ways to leverage its rich library of IP. I think that taking the energy that they were putting into games like Various Day Life and The Quiet Man and Balan Wonderworld, and a handful of games that are really bad, and games that were like Diofield Chronicle, which is like, there's something there, but it's a challenging uphill battle to get people to pay attention to that. The energy that was going into quite a few games that they were releasing and taking that and applying more of that energy to something like a Parasite Eve that at least has name recognition and people occasionally going, hey, it'd be cool if they made another one of those. Now, the chances of Parasite Eve, I don't know. I haven't really looked. I always remember people saying that there's like IP issues involved in there.
Yeah, that multiple people own the rights
to
that.
It's like a book series or something like that. So maybe that one doesn't come back, or maybe they do some sort of spiritual successor, or they work something out, whatever. Either way, though, the idea of like looking back and doing more with their games, at a certain point, they should just like be like, hey, let's do another Chrono Trigger, right? Like, why doesn't that feel like that would be such a better use of their? I mean, I get it's hard to like make a good one of those that lives up to that legacy.
Totally. But
it's also it's difficult to make a game that no one knows the name of and then they forget about in a week because it was Various Day Life.
Yeah, I mean, 100% make another Chrono game. That would be incredible. You know, I think that as far as, say, you know, the existing kind of sequel to Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, I don't think it's a great Chrono Trigger sequel, but I think it's a great game. And I think that, again, it's like if they kind of embrace that idea of this like loose connectivity where you don't have to necessarily have played all the other titles to get it, but if you have, there are some rewards involved. I mean, it's like take those things that people recognize and lean into those. You know, you can't fully overlook the sort of near of it all as well. You know, because Yoko Taro's definitely got a very dedicated fan base. So I think that there is, you know, there's potential money to be made there as well. And again, just increasing accessibility to your games is only going to benefit you in the long run.
Yep. Let's see what else here as part of this. You know what? Let's get to the next story that also relates to that. To this, excuse me. Square Enix confirms its canceled games, which don't. They canceled the games that don't fit with this new development strategy. This comes from Chris Scullion at VGC. Square Enix has confirmed that it has canceled a number of unannounced game projects because they don't fit with its new strategy. The publisher had previously suggested that it would be canceling projects, but wasn't specific about the details. During a meeting held in late March, the company said it expected to report content abandonment losses as part of its plan to overhaul its development process to improve game quality. Now, as part of its latest financial results report, it has now officially confirmed the cancellations and explained why they were made. The new report says profits were down nearly 70% from the previous year, partly due to the recognition of $141 million in losses on disposable content and extraordinary losses. According to the report, these losses were based on the termination of development efforts for some key pieces of content in the digital entertainment segment, essentially meaning game cancellations. The company says the projects were canceled because they don't fit with the new medium-term business plan, specifically its new approach to how HD games are developed. In the new strategy, which is titled Square Enix Reboots and Awakens, the publisher, man, even their business names
Reboots and Awakens.
The publisher highlights a number of ways it plans to deliver high-quality games and make more players happy. It's still kind of vague, Emma.
It is very vague. Yeah,
but it's like the kind of go ahead.
I get the gist of what they're saying here, which is, again, focusing on those legacy titles, which, as I already said, they are in an advantageous position because really all you're bringing to it is the title, name recognition, and some elements people can expect. You're starting from zero with a story essentially every time. And that is a good thing because basically this is going to be a weird analogy I'm going to make right now. It's like why there is, if you're a writer trying to develop your skills, why there is real benefit in writing fan fiction. And that is because you are working within an established thing that people have an interest in. And so they are going to read it and you're going to be able to get like real-time reader feedback. You know, is that as valuable as getting editor publisher feedback? Not necessarily, but there is value in that. And again, so it's like when you are bringing in that name recognition, there are people who are going to show up and buy that game simply because it's called Final Fantasy or it's called Dragon Quest.
That's right.
So I get, and it's extremely unusual that Square sees any modicum of success with titles that are totally brand new.
Yeah.
So why not take advantage of the fact that you are in a position to have some fun in these worlds? I think, whatever you feel about Final Fantasy 16, it was a big swing. They decided, you know what, we're going to really go with a serious storyline in this, which we'd already seen in Final Fantasy Tactics, but I digress. And we're going to make this a single player action RPG. It wasn't for everybody, but it was a risk that they took. And I think that that's awesome. And there is lower risk involved in taking these risks when you are playing within an existing franchise.
Yeah, and I think that's that they're looking for some safe ground to return to, while also not necessarily slowing down completely on investing in their games, because that's not really an option. So where do they go? Let's go someplace recognizable and safe and feels like it can pay off. I think that's a little bit disappointing, but this is a company that has, people always point out, oh, they have such high expectations. What are they talking about? Yeah, but when we look at these numbers, when they are talking about operating income like being down massively year over year, it was something like 60%, I believe. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but all of their numbers were down year over year. But like how much money they're actually making compared to how much they're spending is down significantly, and that trajectory is something that they've been concerned about for some time. And now here it is in black and white, and they're like, okay, we have to make some changes. And I think establishing a new foundation of, hey, let's get some hits, let's get some successes out there, let's figure out what we're doing, let's reinvest in our technology. And I think this comes up on every episode of the show now, but look at what Capcom's doing, do more stuff like that. Then once we have that basis of Final Fantasy games are coming out and they're anticipated and they're hitting and they're doing very well and it's growing, each game is selling better than the last one, as opposed to what it's happened recently where it's trending downward, and it's going to trend back upward because now we're putting it more places and has a better chance to succeed. Once that basis is there, I think it's like, okay, now we can take some other risks. And in the meantime, the safer risks are games that do have some recognition and looking back to our games and bringing those forward, and at least having the pop of when that shows up at a Summer Game Fest or whatever, or the Game Awards, and we show a logo, people go, oh my God, I remember playing that as a kid. That puts you so far ahead of the curve. I think that
far ahead. So, all you need, and I'm gonna give Feast of Violet the credit for this. All you need to do is put the bouncer 2 on the screen, and people will be so excited.
Jan would. Yeah, Jan definitely would. But we'll see about that one. That one might be too far, everybody, but we'll see how they end up playing this out.
Not to derail, but I have one of my magazines that I got in my supporting the Video Game History Foundation, where they send you the old gaming magazines. One of mine, the cover story is the bouncer.
Yeah, mine is Mario Party. There you go, everybody.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God, I love it.
All right, let's move on here. Prominent leaker claims Nintendo project codenamed Yukingo is in the works, and there might be some more details here. We'll get into that. This is from Nintendo Soup. A prominent leaker has shared the codename of another project in the works at Nintendo, which has sparked speculation about the recently confirmed Switch successor. The leaker in question is Midori, who is well-known for leaking Sega-related news. Their latest claim is that a project codenamed U-King-O, U-King-O, is being worked on at Nintendo. Similar to their previous codename claim, however, they did not share any details about what this project could be. In a series of replies, another user speculated that the codename is a port of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for the Switch successor. This is because Breath of the Wild's codename is U-King, and Nintendo tends to codename ports by adding an additional letter at the end. They've done this in the past, where so when a game would get ported to the Switch, they would keep the codename and then do -S at the end. When it would get ported to the 3DS, they would add -C to the end, because the code name for the 3DS was like CTR or something like that. Either way, yeah, that sounds about right. But boy, does that bring up a lot of questions about how they're going to handle this. So, for one thing, we've heard for a while now that they have done some work on Breath of the Wild for the Switch 2. Now, that has mostly been for demonstration purposes to show to developers. They were apparently at GDC showing the thing off, and what they were showing was Breath of the Wild running on the Switch 2 without loading times. So that, hey, look, this whole thing can now run without loading times. Isn't that impressive? that work sounds like it's going to likely turn into a commercial product. We don't know yet. This is all still, it could be a code name for just the demonstration. This might never happen. But sure. Breath of the Wild getting a remaster of sorts on Switch 2 makes a lot of sense, Emma. How do you think they treat that, though? Is it an update, a free update? Is it a paid update? Is it a whole new game you have to purchase and the old game just works? Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what to expect.
I mean, my heart says it's a separate purchase.
Okay, but is it a separate purchase like there now here's Breath of the Wild Switch 2 edition and you could buy that again if you want, or is it a $10 update to the Breath of the Wild you already own, or is it both?
Ooh, I mean, that's, it's so difficult to say because, I mean, obviously we see a lot of games that were released on the PS4, for example, and have an optimization for the PS5, like Witcher 3 or
and many of them, some of them were free, some were $10 updates and things like that.
Exactly. I think it ultimately depends on like how different is the hardware we're working with. And if they are, and again, it's like you're talking about, they're basically showing Breath of the Wild running with no load times. I think in that case, probably it is like a $10 upgrade. But I truly, truly believe that this is going to be something that's really been rebuilt. Obviously not from the ground up because they have a lot of framework to work with, but it's going to be like a Last of Us Part 1.
Sure.
You know what I mean by that?
Totally, yeah.
So I think that's probably what we would be getting. And yeah, chat's popping off saying it's a new $70 game. Yeah, and I don't disagree.
This just a little preview. This will be the poll question for tomorrow or for Wednesday, everybody. So you will have you vote then. I think Weezeman54 might have it. Breath of the Wild Deluxe. Think about Link's Awakening versus Link's Awakening DX on the Game Boy Color.
Yes.
Basically the same game, but it had to have color now. So they added that. It wasn't great in my opinion as someone who's a Link's Awakening fanboy.
I had DX. I totally know.
Yeah, but it was a whole separate thing that you bought. Now, of course, there weren't updates back then. There wasn't DLC, but that's not the point. I think the point is Nintendo. It will look for the way to sell the thing, and this is something they've done before, and I think they could easily pull that off again. But boy, it would be nice if they established this as this is on the Switch, and if you own it, you already own it, and this is a free update. I think that the reason everyone is skeptical of that is that's not Nintendo's MO, right?
Right. Yeah. Look, I've bought. The number of times I've purchased Star Ocean, the second story, I fully believe that this will be a separate purchase game.
Yep, and Sean points out Mario Kart 8 Deluxe exists.
That's true.
Very easily. That's
true.
All right, let's assume that this is exactly what Zelda Breath of the Wild Deluxe is going to be on the Switch. It is going to be the deluxe version, a whole new separate purchase. Does that mean that we don't get updates for other games that improve the performance or whatever on Switch 2 unless they get a version like this?
Oh, if we establish right off the bat that this is
let's say that you're right, that there's enough work being done to this to justify it being a deluxe, and anything else would be like, well, yeah, we'll patch it and we'll get maybe this game that was running at 30 can now run at 60 frames per second, but that's all we're going to do. I mean, do we get those still, or does this sort of thing only happen if Nintendo can charge $70 for it?
I think that other games would likely get a scenario wherein they get optimized for the Switch 2, as you say, like, okay, now this can run in 60 instead of 30 because the Switch 2 can run 60. But I don't think that we're going to get any sort of like big time upgrades without paying for the game again.
Yep. The thing is,
that's Nintendo.
Yep. And the thing is, we've heard backward compatibility is fully in this system. So the Breath of the Wild you own, and that old Breath of the Wild you're going to be able to get for, well, not that like it's super cheap, but you probably maybe can get it secondhand for $40. That'll be out there and run on this device. So it will maybe make it look a little bit stranger because Wii U games didn't run on the Switch, right? So Mario Kart 8 versus Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. If you want Mario Kart 8, you got to pay up. That's not going to be the same case for Breath of the Wild, at least as far as we know.
Yeah.
it's a lot of questions, and it is an interesting conversation because it's like, well, we have our desires and our expectations, and Nintendo, of course, wants to make as much money from this as possible, but they're also riding a lot of positive momentum. Do they care about that? They might not. I don't know. I can't wait for all these things to get answered because I think it'll be, at the very least, interesting and worth talking about on shows like this, and then also might be a major headache if it's Nintendo fully Nintendoing.
I mean, Nintendo gonna Nintendo. That's what I think.
I think that's a safe assumption at this point. Absolutely, yeah. And when my digital games will be playable on the Switch too. Yeah, I mean, as far as we know, and this is based on early reporting, but all the reporting has reiterated this time and time again now. Digital and physical games will all be fully backward compatible on the Switch too. And I think that we would take that as for granted, Emma, at a certain point. But there were questions about that because the Switch 2 is using slightly different chipsets than the Switch. So there was no guarantee here.
And Nintendo also doesn't have a great history of backwards compatibility.
When they do, it's like because they put the system in there in a smaller version. Like it would be
exactly.
Like there's actually just a Game Boy Advance in this DS.
Game Boy Pocket. Exactly.
Right. But it would have been something we wouldn't expect to happen here. But it sounds like either that has happened or they worked with NVIDIA to figure out the compatibility layer, which is probably the right move because I think we're talking about like long-term support for these games. If they just put a tiny little switch on the chip on the bigger chip in here, well, that does not solve it in the future when like we get to Switch 3. You have to do that again forever. So I think the likely thing here is they just figured out compatibility layer and they could just carry that forward. And now those games will just work on Switch systems and Nintendo systems ad infinitum. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we get back, there's rumors about Doom happening. We'll talk about that. Ghost of Tsushima and the PlayStation on PC continues to be a mess. All of that and more right after this. All right, we are back, and let's get right back into it with it looks like a Doom announcement could happen at the Xbox Games Showcase. This comes from Ben Lyons at Game Reactor. There are so many rumors and reports doing the rounds right now in regards to the future strategy of Xbox and what the Xbox Games Showcase in June might deliver that it could be an absolute nightmare to tell what is and isn't accurate. We just have to trust in the sources themselves, which is what makes the latest rumor, if you can call it, all the more compelling. The Verge's Tom Warren has published a recent report that suggests something Doom-related will be announced during the showcase in June. The exact specifics of this Doom project remain unclear, and as Warren simply states, and this is at the end of like a long report about what the hell is going over at Xbox. This is in like the last paragraph here, and I didn't notice this until I was reading the story. Microsoft will be banking on some new game announcements lifting the Doom, and he put it in italics, around Xbox. While this is hardly confirmation, the wording is peculiar and highly suggestive, to say the least. I'll say, I've heard Doom's going to be there from multiple people now. Like this is a rumor that seems to be pretty well corroborated at this point. I think we could expect that. Is that what you want from id right now? Because I remember mentioning this to a couple people when I first heard this rumor, and like people were like, hey, it would have been nice to get a Quake now instead. Like just take a break from Doom for a little bit.
Instead of a Doom. I totally feel that sentiment because again, it's like going back to what we were talking about with Square Enix, where it's like you have these established long-running franchises, and sometimes you want another of the other thing before we get another Final Fantasy. You want another. I just read
Masters of Doom, Emma, and like this was a conversation that they were having after Doom 2, and it's like, should we do Doom 3? And it's like, I want to do Doom 3, and then they would get big fights. Like, no, I want to do something different. I want to do a sci-fi or like a fantasy RPG, and they start working on that. And then that was what Quake originally was. It was called Quake, based on one of their D&D characters. And it's like, hey, we're gonna do this fantasy RPG, and then they abandoned that and just turned it to be more like a Doom, but obviously
like Doom,
different,
but not Doom.
So this is absolutely the conversation they've been having for a long time. Now they're under Microsoft, still kind of probably having that conversation, and yet I think going back to Doom is at this point is not the same thing as like back then. Like then it was like these games come out so frequently. Another Doom would be like, oh, Doom 3 already. Now it's like, it has been a while since Doom Eternal, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, the twist is Doom is at Summer Games Fest, but you're playing it on a Tesla super truck.
Yeah. Okay. Hell yeah. Let's go. Of course.
It's just, why would you want another Doom on Xbox or a PC when you can play it on a TI-83?
Yeah, let's go. Hey, Doom can run on anything. Didn't someone get Doom running on like a blood cell before? That's my number one favorite.
Really? I know about
crazy stuff.
Definitely a digital pregnancy test, a microwave.
For sure.
I think a TI-83 calculator. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, so Doom, I think that there's still a chance that some other games could show up. How are you feeling about like what the rumors around a Doom showcase, or excuse me, an Xbox showcase right now? And do they need something else to sort of come out and surprise you to be fully happy with it, or is it like, I need to play these games to know?
I think Doom is a title that carries a ton of weight, and that obviously, because like I always have to think of things in terms of the bigger picture and not the people who are necessarily, and like Chad is in the same boat. Like we're in there and we are like dissecting what is going on in the gaming world. But it's the same way as when like a new Star Wars movie comes out and I'm like, oh, I'm so tired of Star Wars because I'm paying attention to everything Star Wars. But your average person is just like, cool, new Star Wars movie. I'll go see that. I like Star Wars. That sounds great. And that's like kind of how I feel like Doom is within the cultural zeitgeist outside of the really like locked in gaming community. And so I think that as far as things go, the people who are going to actually be watching the Xbox showcase might be like, oh, we really needed something else. And quite frankly, I think there probably will be some other big announcement, but your average, like, I played Doom on the PC. Oh, cool. Yeah, maybe I'll check it out because it's a Doom.
Yeah, and I think it's like recently. Okay, I think Dan's setting off the game sent again. Oh, yep, he definitely is. Okay. Recently, Xbox has been doing a good job of being like, hey, we have a ton of Western RPGs, but their bread and butter for a long time has been first-person shooters. I think coming out of this showcase, or not necessarily just first-person, but shooters across the board, it'll be this Doom. It's very likely, although like I said on over the weekend, things could shift. But Gears of War, something new, Gears of War could be there.
Sure.
And then Perfect Dark, I've now heard could be there as well. So it's like, all right, a lot of shooters, and Xbox tends to do this, where it's like, hey, we have a lot of games in this genre all at the showcase. But that for the shooter genre, that's like not such a bad thing, because that's such a big space that kind of can support all these different games if they feel different enough. And do you think like Doom, Gears, Perfect Dark could all take up different segments in that space?
I don't know. As you say, they're all shooters. They're different, certainly from each other. I was a big Perfect Dark fan back on the N64, even though I didn't have an N64, but I would play my neighbor's N64, and I liked that the main character was a girl. That was very fun for me. I
Joanna
could see myself
Dark,
represented in games. Very, very important. So yeah, I mean, I think that, something like a Perfect Dark carries a lot of excitement and anticipation that is very separate from, say, a Doom. But I do think that Xbox has been very strategic in terms of showcasing the fact that there is a broader appeal to Xbox and it isn't just first-person shooters. So I do think that we will probably get to potentially see both of those, but that there will be something else accounting for the fact that not everybody is into FPS.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I think we need if we get into this show and we're watching and it's like, here's Avowed, we just had Starfield, here's the Starfield update, and then here's a handful of shooters. I'd be like, yeah, that feels like a very Xbox show. Is there an update on Fable? Is there an update on do you have another or like even
good.
Right, even the Outer Wilds, or the Outer Worlds, excuse me, Outer Worlds 2, do you have more information on that? Another Western RPG, but still that feels different enough to be like, okay, that rounds out the show. And I think they want to have a really strong showcase here because they need to change the narrative, and I think that's possible, but it really will require them to have a large variety of games that all look like they could be complete bangers. Yeah. And even then, people are still going to be skeptical, right? Because it's like, we need to play these games. We've lost a little faith in you. Sure. So, yeah. I guess while we're on this topic, What's your expectations for like PlayStation and Nintendo? I think PlayStation probably still does have a showcase this month. What are your hopes there?
I mean, I think I'm trying to sort of do the math. I feel like it wasn't until early 2021 that we got the update from Final Fantasy VII Remake where they had the Yuffie DLC. Obviously, I'm sure they're going to have some interim DLC story for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's probably a little too soon to reveal that. As I say, you know, because I'm like trying to think of like what are the big PlayStation exclusives, maybe something for Ghosts, which we're going to talk about pretty soon here, because that obviously was another big PlayStation driver. Astro Boy confirmed.
Or Astrobot, it does sound like it will be there. A new Astro game. I'm a huge fan.
I love Astro's Playroom, so like I would love another Astro.
Sounds like that they'll do that. They'll probably have like an update on PS5 Pro, right? They'll probably talk about that for the first time.
Yes.
But in terms of games, I think it's probably like Astro and like Concord and a handful of those other live service games that they've talked about previously and haven't really shown much of. Beyond that, maybe we get an early look at Ghost of Tsushima too. That would be cool. But they've already said that's not coming out this year. So it could be too early for that at the same time. That wouldn't necessarily stop them from talking about it, but I'm not counting on it. But hey, they're calling it a showcase, so they better have some big announcements. Although I do think they're anchoring a lot of this around PS5 Pro.
Yeah, that's probably the vast majority of what it is.
Yeah, and then for Nintendo, who knows? Who knows? I mean, I do think like God, when we try to like look back at some of the rumors that have like haven't been completely debunked yet, but it seemed to be confirmed, like that Fire Emblem remaster that we've heard about a bunch of times.
Yes.
The genealogy of the Holy War, Mario Baseball makes some sense. Mario and Sonic at the Summer Olympic Games. These are things I hope we see.
Mario and Sonic are definitely going to the Olympics. That I feel very confident that we'll see something around that. But yeah, I mean, give me that genealogy of the Holy War remake. I'm a late to Fire Emblem. Like I'm a classic American Fire Emblemer in that I started with Awakening on the DS.
Me too. Really, I played it before, but never really like played it until Awakening.
I named all the Fire Emblem characters in Smash.
For sure, of course. Who didn't?
But I'd never played a Fire Emblem until Awakening, and obviously like Awakening has a lot of inspiration from genealogy of the Holy War in terms of that like multiple generation kind of stuff. So I really would love a nice remake of that.
Yep. All right, let's move along here. And speaking of Ghost of Tsushima's PC port has been delisted in nearly 200 countries and territories without PSN access, even though most of the game won't require a sign-in. This is from Ted Litchfield at PC Gamer. Mirroring Helldiver 2's continued regional delisting woes, the upcoming PC port of Sucker Punch's 2020 historical samurai slice 'em up, Ghost of Tsushima, has been removed from sale on Steam and other PC storefronts in nearly 200 countries and territories that are not served by Sony's PlayStation Network. Previous Sony PC ports, like God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn, were single-player only and did not require signing into Sony's proprietary online service to play. After a delayed rollout due to Helldivers 2's initial server woes, an attempt by the publisher to institute a mandatory sign-in requirement was met with a massive backlash, leading to the company standing down. One aspect of the situation Sony did not seem to anticipate was that Steam, and thus Helldivers 2 on PC, were available in more countries than PSN, with players in non-PSN supported regions potentially getting locked out of the game they had paid for and been playing. Even after Sony reversed its decision, Helldivers 2 remained unavailable for purchase in those areas. Arrowhead CEO John Pilstad has said that he's pushing for this to be reversed. We'll have more on that here in a second. In the meantime, though, I was under the impression that this was all solved. I thought, like, okay, they reversed their decision, and they'll figure some stuff out. Yeah,
talked about this last week on this show,
right? And I thought the solution to the Helldivers thing was, well, we were reversing that decision, and therefore you could purchase that game in those 200 countries again. That has apparently not been the case. It's not gone back up for sale, and now it's spreading to Ghost of Tsushima.
Well, and also, weren't we talking literally last week about Ghost of Tsushima, and the only reason that you would have to sign into your PSN is if you wanted to do the online multiplayer stuff, which
Right,
is
and that is true.
limited.
Yeah, and that's the case. That's exactly the case. So the single player game is completely, offline. Basically, you don't need to sign a PSN, but because the requirement is there for Legends and
it's
in
been
there,
delisted. Yeah, exactly. Like, this is a mess.
Yeah, and it's feels like at this point you can't help but say, oh, Sony just doesn't really have this PC thing figured out yet. They are stumbling around in there, and they're trying to, get a strong foothold on PC, but that keeps turning into them sort of sticking their foot into an alligator's mouth or something like that, where they just keep making these boneheaded moves that are causing them way more headaches than it seems they need to be putting up with. If they just completely drop the requirement, then the game should just be on sale in all these countries. Well, just do that.
And again, frankly, the requirement for Ghost of Tsushima, as established, is so minimal.
Yeah.
It's a single player offline game. So you are now limiting people being able to do that by simply having a requirement that they sign into their PSN if they want to play offline. So it can't even be listed in the Steam store. I don't know if Sony understands the internet. I don't know if they've heard of it.
Yeah, it seems really like they're just beefing it here, and it's like, they're not even really using the PlayStation Network protocol to like play these games online. I mean, I guess maybe that's how Legends is going to work. I don't know. With its multiplayer, maybe that's how that'll work. But
sure, fine.
But Helldivers 2 has worked just fine without PSN. So obviously it's using something else other than the PSN to operate. So by even like suggesting that this requirement, it's just getting in the way and causing a problem where we can go back to the thing we've said a bunch of times about this now. Hey, make it an incentive, give people a reason to want to sign up by giving them currency. But okay, the reason you need to do it that way now is because so many of these countries don't have PSN, but they could still, it turns out they could still sign up for PSN. They just sign up. They've been doing it for years, apparently.
Right.
They just sign up for US PSN accounts. And Steam, and I think that there's some back and forth here about is Sony delisting it, is Steam Valve delisting it, and it sounds like it's coming down to it's a little bit of both. But either way, these companies feel like they can't release this or like officially sell this game in this country while that sort of Damocles of the PSN requirement is hanging over the game. I don't know. Do they have to make some clean break here or come up with some other solution? I don't know.
Right. Because again, it's like the main issue that we're running into here is that it's the disconnect between PSN and Steam and the fact that PSN doesn't exist in a bunch of regions. As you say, you can sign up for a US PSN account, but why? Again, no incentive, but how do you divorce these things so that it can exist in the Steam store and you can access everything that you are able to access without logging into a PSN account? Like, basically, how do you keep it listed in the Steam store? There's clearly some sort of problem happening here.
Yep. And I know someone in Twitch chat says Valve literally said PlayStation delisted them. I know, but whenever like I read further stories, it's like Sony said Valve's doing it. So I think it probably is Sony responsible. I think Valve probably is just saying exactly what's going down here. But regardless, that's beside the point. At a certain point, Sony just needs to figure this out. This is getting kind of silly at this point. And the PSN sign-on requirement can't be so important that you're shutting out 200 countries around the world.
Why did 90% of the countries in the world not have PSN?
Yeah. Speaking of that, Arrowhead CEO says Helldivers 2 Steam situation isn't looking positive. That characterization of the headline, we'll get into that. This is from Jake Coleman at DualShockers. Arrowhead Games Studio CEO Johan Pilstedt has provided an update on the ongoing Helldivers 2 publishing controversy. Currently, Helldivers 2 has been delisted from Steam in almost 200 countries. This is in the wake of Sony's attempt to force players to link their PlayStation Network and Steam accounts. PSN isn't available in many countries and territories, which barred many players from accessing the game. This decision was later reversed by Sony after player backlash, but Helldivers 2 remains delisted in affected territories. Recently, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia were added to the list. Arrowhead remains in negotiations with Sony, but Pilstedt isn't optimistic. And that, just to clarify, there was that list of like 100 and 77 and growing games. And recently, Sony has added even more games to the list. So it's like they're expanding where this game is not available. So to give an update, and this is from Pildstat, on the 3 further country restrictions, they should have been part of the original restriction, and it was noticed when the restriction was put in place for Tsushima. This was noticed and executed independently by Valve. So again, back and forth. This is where the confusion came from. When I read that, I'm like, okay, who is doing this? Is it Sony or Steam? I think it's a combination of both. I think Sony's going to them and saying, hey, we're doing this, so it does need to be delisted in the countries where PSN isn't available. And I think Valve is actually doing the process of actually delisting it. So that's where like this confusion comes in. Pillstat goes on to say, while it doesn't look positive, it is not an indication of further restrictions. I think when he says it doesn't look positive, I think he's saying the optics of us doing this doesn't look good.
Right,
but it's not indicative of further restrictions. The conversation on region restriction is still ongoing and is independent of this. I have no further information. We still want the game to be available everywhere. Hope you all have a great Saturday, and I'm sorry I don't have a better update. So yeah, Arrowhead says they're still like advocating to get the game available everywhere. That's what they're going after. But I read this and I'm like, again, I thought this was solved. How can this be that complicated? And if you're going to reverse your decision about the PSN sign-in requirement for Sony, you have to fully solve this. It can't stop here, right?
No, you can't just say, okay, you don't have to sign into your PSN account, but because there is a PSN account login aspect, we still can't list it in countries that don't have PSN. It's wild. I mean, this is the story all over again with Ghost of Tsushima, where it's like I don't know, Sony, this is not a good time for you. Yeah, and it's people pointing out there's not 200 countries. It's over 200 countries and regions apparently. Regions, all right.
So that's where that goes at. Yeah. I don't envy Johan Pilstad over at Arrowhead having to figure this out. It feels like he is butting his head up against a Sony that, as you said earlier, doesn't seem to fully understand the ramifications of the decisions they're making. Sony's been more savvy than this in the past, but this does kind of go back to like there's some stubbornness from these kinds of companies, and I think we're seeing it once again. Where do you think this shakes out? Do you think it shakes out like that game's just going to actually be unlisted in all these countries for good, and then like slowly as PSN gets added into some of these other countries, sure, it comes back at that point, or does Sony find a way to like fully unravel this mess they made?
No, I think that Sony fully finds a way to unravel this mess that they made, and it's truly because you have the team behind Helldivers 2 actively working on this, and because it's already made such a big splash internationally in regions that don't have PSN. These people have already been playing this game, and there's a strong community around it. And I think that because of basically the people rallying together and having this game that really was a surprise hit, that we will end up with Sony figuring out a way to do this. And ultimately that is going to benefit games in the future that Sony has publishing rights to. Either that, or this is gonna force Sony to figure out how to make PSN a worldwide option.
Yep. And in case anyone was wondering what this news story smells like, I think it smells like gunfire and explosions, according to Dan Reichert, who keeps setting off my game scent again. You know about Zimma? Got the game scent in my house, and Dan Reichert can remotely control it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's the correct response. That's 100%. Dan says correct. Cool.
Correct. Cool.
Oh, boy. All right. Let's move along here. EA apparently is exploring the idea of in-game ads in traditional AAA titles. This is from Liam Doolin at Nintendo Life. Third-party video game giant Electronic Arts had its earnings call this week, and CEO Andrew Wilson was asked about the possibility of dynamic ad insertion across more traditional AAA games. The idea is supposedly already being explored, but it's still early on that front, and the company will be very thoughtful about the implementation, assuming it goes ahead with something like this. We've had teams internally in the company right now looking at how we do every thoughtful implementations inside of our game experience. While EA already technically has ads in select titles and live services like EA Sports FC 24, these latest comments from the company's CEO are once again focused on personalized dynamic ad insertion paired with some traditional game experiences. Hey, don't do this.
Don't do this.
This sucks.
Can you imagine you're in the middle of like a Star Wars, a Jedi game, and there's this big, deep story, and then all of a sudden you have to watch a commercial for Charmin toilet paper? Like, what?
Right. I mean, and I think that's exactly the scenario that they would try to pull off here. I mean, this is going to be very thoughtful, but let's be clear. The ad inventory will be most valuable when people are most enthralled with their game. And
yes.
Having a fake loading screen and being like, well, while it's loading, what if you watched this commercial is 1,000,000% something they would try to pull off.
Oh, 100% it's something that they would try to pull off. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Am somebody who works primarily on branded content.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I basically make commercials for video games or for Coca-Cola that include people playing video games or reporting on video game news, et cetera, et cetera. What video games need to do if they want to go this route is we got to go the way of Hollywood. You know what I mean? So a lot of brands, they pay for product placement within their games or within TV shows, within movies. Okay, so Apple, everybody in your video game, they've all got Macintosh computers, or everybody uses an iPhone, and you clearly see that Apple logo. That's the only way that this works, right. And it doesn't completely disrupt the ecosystem.
Yes, the only other option is, as Bludgeon points out in chat, Cerveza Cristal.
Yeah,
like actually, like fully going the way where it's like, okay, this is not just someone using a Mac. It's clearly an advertisement, but it's so like instilled in the world that it's kind of funny. And there's a couple of game brands that could pull that off. I would play a fully branded WarioWare game where it's just WarioWare doing batshit and insane stuff with Budweiser. I don't know.
Look at something like a GTA. So easy to go crazy on your product placement to the point that it's comical, and it should be, like
Dan says that sounds like my dream game. Me too. That sounds so yeah. And Jan says Splatoon plus dude wipes. There you go.
Sure, great. Yes.
Why not? Oh boy.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. Last story. Sony reportedly formed studio with former Deviation game devs. This is from Jordan Miller at VGC. Sony has reportedly founded a new studio within PlayStation made up of former Deviation Games employees. That's according to Michael Anthony, a former Deviation Games employee on LinkedIn. Hey, I hear that a lot of previous Deviation Games employees have set up their own studio at Sony working on an undisclosed new IP, he wrote on the platform. All the people I see working there have signed up, are top-class developers, and I hope that you can create a top-class new IP with your studio that hopefully gives you all the time you need to create a quality product and not have to deal with the red tape from previous projects. Deviation Games, which was founded in 2020, was by two experienced Call of Duty developers, didn't get a chance to release its debut project, an original IP that was set to be exclusive to the PlayStation platforms. In September 2022, one of Deviation Games' co-founders, Chief Executive Officer Jason Blundell, left the studio. It would appear that Jason Blundell is now involved in the new studio. Following Anthony's post, users on social media highlighted a post from former Deviation Games employee JC Farmer from December, which read, "I've been wanting to say this for a while, but now I finally can. I'm a junior game designer at PlayStation Studios, and I work for Jason Blundell." So yeah, it sounds like that Deviation Studios, which kind of started up and was independent, but had a contract with PlayStation.
Yeah.
Yes. And then that fell apart. PlayStation, I think, kind of pulled out of that, the funding for that project, and then the studio fell apart after Jason Blundell left. Sounds like a lot of people are just like, hey, let's just go start something within Sony, and that's going to work out just fine. Hopefully that turns into a good game, but hey, some good news there for people who may have lost their jobs at the previous studio, finding a place to land.
Absolutely. No, that is absolutely a very positive thing in an industry where layoffs are running rampant, or games are getting canceled and contracts being terminated. I think that, as you say, that is the positive aspect of this, but boy, oh boy, can't wait for Deviation to make a great online game that immediately gets delisted on Steam because PlayStation can't figure out how internet works.
Man, with someone with early onset old man brain, I really do think that that's the only explanation for what's going on over at Sony is some old men are in charge and they don't get it. So.
They just don't get it. Yeah. I mean, I can speak from firsthand experience with having worked at Universal and old men being in charge and being like, well, socks and sandals. I don't get it, but people like Fast and the Furious, so we just keep making them because they keep making money.
All right. Let's see here. Last story. Tez2 on Twitter found a reference to Red Dead Redemption 1 on the Rockstar PC launcher. There's just kind of a little like thread here inside of the launcher. It says like journey across the sprawling expanses of the American West and Mexico in Red Dead Redemption and its zombie horror companion Undead Nightmare, now playable on PC. And that's in quotes for the product promotion intro body for Red Dead Redemption within the launcher. Hey, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Probably gonna
Red Dead Redemption is a good game.
Yeah, and it's something where I think that rumor's gone around before. Yes. They never actually got around to doing it, but hey, now they may. We'll see.
Better late than never, I guess.
I suppose so, yes. All right, that does it for the news. I got a poll question here. Let me see if I can get that up and ready for everybody. There it is. Okay, will you use an Xbox mobile game store? I asked this on Friday. 15% said yes, they would. 85% said no. Emma, is there a world in which you could see yourself being like, oh yeah, I'll just get that on the Xbox mobile game store that they're apparently launching in July?
Meaning, like, you can buy games for your Xbox using a mobile game store?
The way it sounds like it's going to work is you can download, let's say, Call of Duty Mobile from the App Store, and then once you're in the game, you would launch the Xbox Mobile Game Store through that would open up in the browser, and like they have the ability to like present browser apps as apps.
Yes.
But it would be like, this is now the Xbox Mobile Game Store. What if you purchase stuff for Call of Duty Mobile through us for slightly less money, and we'll take that money instead? It sounds like that's going to be how it works. I think if that's the case, some people might do that if it's an easy enough process.
Right, because everybody likes to save money.
Yeah, everybody likes to save money, but this is something like Epic's like looked at before and tried. Now they've been prevented from doing that by Apple and Google and stuff like that. But we'll see. Beyond that, I just don't think that this thing's going to be able to get much momentum. But hey, if this enables them to get some more of that money by bad. But the problem with this though is, this doesn't allow them, like if they start doing this and this becomes the law of the land, it's going to look weirder and weirder that Xbox can't have other stores, right? So I think that explains why they might be looking at letting other stores onto Xbox in the long run. Which
I don't think I'd use it.
Yeah. Yep. We'll see. All right. I got a new poll question. We'll get to that here in a second. Before I do, Emma, why don't you tell people where they can find you, what we have going on, all that good stuff.
So I'm at Emma Fyffe all over the internet. Don't participate much in social media except to sometimes post on Instagram. So you can find me there. You can find me at the Giant Bomb live show on June 9th at the Bellwether Theater in lovely downtown Los Angeles, California. Get your tickets now. And also you can find me in videos that pop up on fandom wikis all over the internet. This week's video is me unraveling exactly what the heck Blocks Fruits is and why that wiki's so popular.
Yeah, okay. I got to find out what's going on there. All right. Hey, once again, get those tickets. June 9th, Los Angeles, the Bellwether, Giant Bomb at Night Live, night 3. We'll have some announcements about like the folks that are going to be there, some friends of the show, some big names here pretty soon. All right. New poll question. How do you think Nintendo would handle a Breath of the Wild update on Switch 2? Here are your options. No enhancements, free update with enhancements. The game sin is getting in my mouth again. Paid update around $10 with enhancements, and enhancements exclusive to a Switch 2 re-release. That seems to be the one that most of you in chat were popping off for. That'll be up on youtube.com/@GiantBomb under the community tab. Vote on that. We'll get the results. We'll discuss it on Game S Mornings on Giant Bomb on Wednesday. Speaking of Giant Bomb, we'll have some fun stuff popping off in the early part of this week. Probably something we'll record and put up. The timing on that will just have to be determined. And then we'll have most of the regular stuff this week. Obviously, Bombcast. We'll have Blight Club. I'll be getting back to Daikatana, a voicemail dump truck, whole bunch of fun stuff. UPF, we got some plans for that already. Look out for all of that and more on giantbomb.com. Emma, thank you so much for spending today talking with me about video games. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you all for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself. And see you at the Bellwether. Get your tickets.
Yeah.